Hello, something a bit different today because we're looking at a game. I got contacted by the developers of a game called Firehawk FPV Drone Warfare Simulator, who asked me if I'd like to look at it and sent me a code for Steam. I thought, why not? So I thought, we'd check it out, we'll see how this thing plays and see how it goes. Now, it should be mentioned that I have, I guess what you'd call skin in the game. I have my own quad simulator, so I have to try my best not to give it shameless plugs. So we'll put a counter just up here just to make sure I don't do anything, which is hard because it's great. Oops. Anyway, let's get on with this. Right then, so if we go into Steam and we search for FPV, we get a whole bunch of things. There are quite a lot of FPV things these days. We got most of the well-known ones there: Liftoff, Uncrashed, Freerider. There's Firehawk, and look, there's little old me. Oops. Now, straight off the bat, I get a bit annoyed here because if you look at these little symbols, that little square box means Windows, this little apple means it works on Apple, and that little Steam thing means it works on the Steam controller. Now, most people tend to develop cross-platforms. In most modern game engines, it's pretty easy to do so. The worst offender is Unreal for being mostly based around DX12. However, I've already looked at Firehawk and it's based on the Unity engine, which is very easy to put out different versions. The main reason they haven't done it, because I asked them, they talked about like binary incompatibilities, but it works on a runtime. What it is they don't want to support it. They're saying like it's 2% of their customers may be running Linux or Mac, and that's too much effort to put into making sure they're okay. Well, here's a tip for you. Put it out there and say this is experimental. This does not receive the same amount of support as the Windows version. That's your primary target. And then you'd get something that everybody can use. So for me, running on Macs, I'm running on my Intel iMac here. I have to do some messing around to get it to work. So if we go onto their Steam page, it'll show us the little demo reel of what they've got there, and as you can see, it's very much go around blowing stuff up like you in this battle quad. Now, some of you might be saying, oh my god, we don't want to encourage this, we don't want quads being used for warfare. A, I think that ship has sailed, and B, don't think of this as like we're flying quads and trying to kill people with them. Think of it as it's a game, we're using quad controls, we're using a hobby grade radio to fly them around, and it's just a bit of fun doing this. You know, we all play Call of Duty without being crazy people running along with guns and killing people, so I'm sure we can play something which has like an FPV style drone in which we shoot without going and doing the same thing. Anyway, price wise, they've put it up there with some of the other FPV simulators. It's a little bit on the price side, but we'll play the game in a bit more detail and find out. Now, I mentioned I had to mess around on my Mac to make this work, and the messing around in this case is Crossover. Now, there was an open source package for that called Whiskey, which did a pretty good job of doing this, but that's not any longer being developed, and so Crossover here. Crossover is a commercial version, but you can get a 7-day free license, which is what I've done, and I've used that to go and install Steam. So after installing Steam on Crossover, I went ahead and installed Firehawk FPV and a couple of things I also wanted to play on my Mac. It should work a lot better than if we were just using a VM, because we don't have the overhead of the operating system, but still not as good as obviously if we were doing native stuff. So let's launch it and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to film this with a camera rather than capture it because it will slow down even more. I'm running at a reduced resolution of 1280 by 720 with quality on medium. I've also tried it on low and it's about the same. As you see on this screen here, just sat there, I'm on 51 frames a second. And the problem is not so much the frame rate is like reduced, it's more about being inconsistent. I'm using the controller here. So if we zip off and start doing stuff, you'll see that the frame rate is, well, it's not staying still. So I could live with it if it is like going to be 30 frames a second, but it slows down a lot, which makes things a little bit hard. It's not bad. Probably work a lot better, of course. We had a Mac version, but we do not. So this is not really giving me enough to play things well. I can play it. I've got sort of, you know, several levels through and it's okay, but I'm not enjoying the slowdown it gives me. Okay, plan B is this. This is an M2 MacBook Pro. It was my daughter's. She had it at university, then she spilled a whole drink on it and it went horrifically wrong, and Apple quoted like something like $1,000 to fix it. So it wasn't working. I managed to take it apart, scrape off all the bad bits. It seems to be generally working, and on the Apple Silicon there's a whole new layer. It's part of the games porting toolkit, so Crossover should be able to run that faster. Okay, so radio connects to laptop going, well, it's actually mirroring to there, which is then going to here, but we've got much better stats on this one, around about 50-60 frames. So let me take you through a mission. Okay, sorry for all the purists, because I'm actually filming on my screen here. So this is mission 3, I think, and I think this describes itself as like a roguelike, which is essentially saying the missions aren't going to be the same. There's a certain element of random generation to what they do. There's different little things, having played a few of these before, that sort of repeat themselves, but not necessarily in the same way. So different, but you'll certainly recognise them if you've been around a few times. There's okay, so in terms of the flying, first of all, what you've got your normal controls, and if you want to, you can set up firing on a switch, but that's a little bit awkward on a standard radio. It's fine if you're going to play with like an Xbox controller, but for regular pilots it's a bit difficult to be reaching around all the time. Now, another thing I don't particularly like about this is a lack of radar. What you basically have to do is sort of search around looking for these little sort of targets, these little sort of green circles. The red things are just enemies that just happen to be there being annoying, which you can take out along the way. The green ones are the ones you're going for. I don't know if it's just some sort of force field or something. There is not a huge amount of instructions, I'd say, or description of like what things do. I don't know if the devs thought, yeah, you can work that as you go, surely, or they just haven't got around to writing them yet, perhaps. But there's like pickups and stuff that appear sometimes, and I was like, what is this? What's it all about? It's a little, well, I'd like a bit more generally. So we're on to relay towers now. But yeah, it's less about sort of like this is an FPV game, and more about, oh, you can use your radio to play this sort of combat game, which I think is quite fun. Again, if you're new to it, I think gamification of learning stuff like flying is quite a good way of doing it. In fact, I've got it on my simulator. You'll find a whole game in it. So the environments are pretty well done. Sometimes you have to go inside things and they can be a little hit and miss, because you're flying something that is, you know, apparently going up to like 400 miles an hour or whatever. So it doesn't necessarily translate that well when you're going inside a building to blow some other stuff up, but you can generally do it. What we've got now, tank reserves. I see around here we've got a couple of pickups. Now these were described anywhere, and I just happened to fly into them, and that's like a heel. That's going to be something else, I guess, some sort of weapon type of thing. Explosion radius boost. Now there are different quads, there's different weapons. Whenever you're like blowing stuff up, you're going to get XP if you finish the mission, and that gives you the option to buy some weapons. You can also sort of loot weapons from other people occasionally. If you blow them up, you can go back and get their weapon. this thing's just going back and forth and being annoying. Okay, that's down. And then we've got the return to base, which is not quite so much a landing thing as just fly into it and you're good to go. But there you go, that's one of the missions. Now, this is the bit I don't particularly like, I have to say, this whole section here. So what we've got here, these are our research points, I guess. And it seems to me like if you unlock drones, then you get to keep them on your next playthrough. There's no sort of, you can come back and start from where you were. This is like you've now got credits to use stuff with, and at the moment we've just got these weapons. We can go to the shop and that gives us other sorts of weapons. We've got weapons that, you know, we've picked up and we can sell. And this is the stuff personally I don't like. I don't like talking about like, oh, what weapons should I use? There's no, it doesn't give you like pros and cons of stuff. It says you can upgrade them and things. It's like, fine, what's that going to do? It's like, you know, more damage and stuff. But I'd prefer this just like, if there was some auto loadout stuff where it gives you some recommended thing, that'd be great. Okay, well, we should talk about sort of controls and stuff. We can go in and we can calibrate our controller. This will do a general calibration when you start, but you've also got the ability to calibrate each of the axes, and if you want to, you can go and allocate some buttons to do various things. There is also a basic tutorial. So we're saying I'm using an FPV controller. If we go to tutorial, it's pretty basic stuff. It's all about like using throttle. Like it wants you to basically just hover in places like that. And then pretty much do the same thing. It's not a very good tutorial. Anyway, so if we go into mission 4, just to show it's going to look a little bit different. And yeah, we've got somewhere a little bit different here. The other thing I'm not a huge fan of is the HUD stuff. Like that 2160 down the bottom, is that my energy? Is that my shield? I don't necessarily think I need my stick overlay on the screen. I don't need to know what my gyroscope's doing. That's all a bit too much. Anyway, so as you can see here, we get up with a little bit of variety by having different missions, but similar. So again, there's some sort of procedural generation to an extent of what's going on here. So it's doing it a little bit different. So it's not the same every time, but generally I think the setting's the same. It's just the different little bits and bobs you can have as you go is different. So I think one of the things that could really be improved is the AI on the other drones. Generally speaking, they don't really react like you'd expect. They sort of turn on a dime, so you end up with yourself and these things going around in circles and just trying to yaw yourself around faster than everything else without really feeling like you're doing aerial combat. That bit's a bit disappointing. And because of the way things can sort of spawn off randomly, you might get like 3 lots of aerial drones coming, and then you're just spinning around constantly trying to take all these things out, or you're blasting away from them trying to get some space so you've got some actual room to get back and sort of find them. So yeah, I think the aerial part's one of the big weaknesses here. Now, should you die, you don't get to go again. You have to go ahead and restart the whole run. But some things are sort of unlocked. So in this time, we've unlocked a fortress, which is a different drone, but all our upgrades and stuff goes lost. So we could say, we'll have the fortress, please. Minigun's kind of fun, actually. Not super accurate, but fire a lot. So I mentioned sometimes we have interior fights. Some of them work well, some of them don't work so well. This is a sort of a tunnel run where it's like you've got some of the enemies in the tunnel, you've got some obviously height restrictions, you've got some other bits and pieces to go under and over. I think this one works quite well. There's enough space for you to fly around, to take out the enemy and not just bump into everything. Then you've got buildings which are a bit trickier to get in, although there's another way in, but you've not quite got so much room because there's pretty much stuff everywhere. You're basically inside a factory and it's a little bit more difficult, and you might have to end up pressing enter a few times, which is kind of like a recovery thing. It sort of resets you and sends you up in the air a bit. So it's a little bit trickier doing the fights in here, because what you end up doing is going round and around and around. I think there was talk, I don't know if it's already in, of the devs putting in like a switch to basically say if you want to put the camera as neutral, by default it's at 30 degrees, or as they call it, -30. Maybe flick a switch and it would do that for you, or you know, even better, it would just figure out that you're in a building and do that bit for you, because you can't just hover and pick stuff off when your camera angle's up at like 30 degrees. But the most annoying one I found was this sort of thing. There are people trying to snipe you from in here, and you can take a certain amount of them out from outside, but trying to get in here again with that high camera angle and trying to fly gently down a corridor like this is really quite tricky. Well, first off, sorry about the filming angle there. It looked like I was cutting off just the top portion of that screen, which I didn't notice, but I don't think you lost anything in that. So I played through that for quite a while, a good couple of hours, and I got to about, I think I got to mission 9, and I can sort of carry on from there if I go back to it. One thing I'd say is, like, it's not something you'd want to play for multiple hours. I think it's a little bit samey. Essentially we're doing the same sort of thing, same sort of missions, we're flying around blowing stuff up, and there's very little variety in that. But to be fair, if you're playing a sim, there's very little variety in that either. So this is something you might dip into for half an hour, much the same you might do with a sim. I don't think anybody's doing sims for like 2 hours at a time, unless they're like hardcore racers that are practicing a circuit going round and round and round. Now, I like some of the combat in there. I kind of like, my favourite one is where you've got these like high-speed vehicles going around a city and chasing them down and firing them is really good fun. But as I mentioned, the aerial combat with the other drones or helis is a bit lacking. We are spinning around each other, and I'm just yawing round and round, and they seem to be able to just turn instantly and come back without any sort of inertia. So I think the AI there could really be improved. Sometimes, because of the random nature of things, you can, on like a harder level than the previous one, get an easier run. So there's not the same sort of enemies that spawn, and it's very easy to take out the targets. And then in some of like what would be the easy levels, you get like spawns of like loads of drones and like SAM launchers and stuff coming at you and taking you out. It's a bit of a mismatch there. Personally, I prefer a very carefully crafted level where the difficulty is set in a very specific way to make things like generally harder as we go on, as opposed to the randomness of it. And one of the other problems I find with this one is, rather than sort of making enemies more difficult to deal with, they just put more enemies in, and so you just sort of, the idea is to like overwhelm you a bit. But there seems to be quite a lot of active development going on. If you look at the Discord, they're talking about like what they're putting in for the next time and stuff, so that's all very positive stuff. I hope they clean this stuff up and make some of that stuff better. My own suggestion to the devs is to make things clearer what's going on there. Like, some of the UI information I don't really get, or it's not necessary to be there. That should be so we can take things out we don't need. The other thing I suggest is, rather than their very lackluster tutorial, which is like hover and like fly forward, is make a tutorial mission. Take them on things like, say this is an enemy, put your reticle over it to blow it up, and if there's a pickup you can say this is a pickup, this is what you need to get, and just explain the process of what's going on as you go. As I mentioned, the whole weapon upgrading thing was a bit lost on me. That's just me, I don't really like that stuff anyway. But weapon wise, it's like, do you want this gun or this gun? I was like, oh, I don't know, what's the real difference between them? There were some stats, but something much easier like this weapon is ranked A versus this weapon is ranked B would be an easier way, and having some sort of auto loadout, it's like we will give you your suggested thing or your suggested upgrade, just so like I don't want to do that, I just want to get on with playing the game, would be nicer for me. And obviously put out a bloody Mac and Linux version, and price wise I do think it's maybe just a little high. I think the magic price point for this sort of thing is about tenner. If you could do it for that, I think it's much more of a, like a, oh, we'll give this a go, we'll see what it's like. There was apparently a demo. I don't know if there's going to be another demo, and people were saying like the demo had a lot of content in, so it would be great if they had one so people could try it out and see if they liked what they were playing before they went ahead and bought. So if you guys have liked what you've seen of this game, then I'll put a link down below to their Steam page so you can have a look. Not sponsored or affiliate or anything, they were just kind enough to give me a code, so I thought I'd give it a review. By the way, I think I did a pretty good job of not putting too many shameless plugs in. I mean, I didn't even mention my one's available on mobile. Oops. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. I will catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.